Hello, all you positive heads out there. It's so good to be back with all you beautiful reflections of the one source consciousness that creates and animates all things. If you're new to this podcast, of course, we are super happy to have you here, and we just ask that you bring an open mind and heart to your listening experience and to be prepared to explore vantage points that I'm convinced will help shift or solidify your current understanding of the ultimate nature of reality in a way that is extremely empowering. Speaking of exploring powerful perspectives, I'm super excited to announce the release of my very first book, The Golden Key: Modern Alchemy to Unlock Infinite Abundance. If you're ready to alchemize the circumstances in your life so that your abundance expands to an entirely new level in 2021, head over to goldenkey.gift to download the audio or ebook as my gift to you by using the code POSITIVEHEAD. All right, all you positive heads. On this week's Soul Share episode, I'm very excited to have Blake Bauer here with me on the show. Blake is an author and self-love coach who helps people overcome fear, insecurity, and depression so that they can love themselves back to happiness. Hello there, Blake. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hi, Brandon. Thank you.
It's wonderful to have you here, and it was such a pleasant surprise to realize that when I saw your face and we talked a little bit, it's like, oh, you were here at the Mystic Manor many years ago for Shaman Durek's book release party, and we met then. So that was a cool, pleasant surprise.
Absolutely. Beautiful, beautiful synchronicity.
Indeed, indeed. Good way to start it off. So let's start with, as far as starting off questions, I've got my cliche opening question I like to ask all my guests, and it is this. You're in an elevator. The woman next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" You got 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
I would say that I love connecting with other people and helping them understand things that I feel really lucky and blessed to have come to understand inside myself, that have helped me overcome my deepest struggles and suffering and just enjoy my life more and have authentic connections and authentic work. Because as the title of my book says, you were not born to suffer. I don't think we came here to suffer, and yet we get so stuck. And so if I can help one person get unstuck, it gives my suffering a lot of purpose. Yeah. And it's really a beautiful thing.
I definitely relate to that. I've done a lot of cool things in my life. I feel really blessed to have perspectives that have helped me to achieve some really, a magical life. And when this podcast has really been the most fulfilling thing that I've done because of the feedback that I've gotten from the people's lives that it's touched and shifted in a way that is, someone going from being depressed and suicidal and, completely disconnected from source to remembering who and what they are and their authentic power is, and then them, whenever someone has taken the time to reflect that, it's like, it's such a rewarding thing, isn't it? So, and we all get that opportunity. I mean, I think it's, we do it to varying degrees, and it's like Gandhi said, if you want to find yourself, lose yourself in the service of others. And I believe that holds true because there are no others. And that's why it's so fulfilling. It's all doing it to self at the end of the day.
Yeah, it is beautiful. I think it's definitely one of the most, I think, sacred and holy things, because when you're meeting other human beings at that raw level, we're not playing a role. And especially in our society, which is, someone's typically selling something and we're consuming something. So when you meet from that raw, genuine place of, I'm really struggling with something and this information actually helped me feel better or find relief, it's pure. It's and in a world that's pretty tainted.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's definitely been it's a tough line, I think, for a lot of people to walk, is, how to keep things really authentic without, making it like, oh, I'm trying to get something from you or sell something. And that's, for me, that's definitely been a dance of like, okay, with my own book. Okay, what if I give it to people and let people opt to pay for something afterwards? And you just take these different, explore different approaches to how to keep it as authentic as possible. And in a monetary based system, everyone's got to live and eat and survive. It can be challenging sometimes. It's that finding that fine line of you know making sure the message is not lost in whatever packaging, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
if you would share a little bit of your backstory, um, I always like to for listeners and for myself to understand a little bit about you know who we're hearing from, how you got to where you're at, whatever feels relevant to share for the purpose of this conversation.
Absolutely. And feel free to, cut me off or ask anything you want at any point. But, I grew up in a family that suffered a lot, and there was a lot of dysfunction and a lot of substance abuse, drug addiction in my
Mm,
family. And then as a teenager, not knowing how to talk about my emotions or deal with my negative, crazy thinking,
mm,
I got heavily into drugs and alcohol. Started abusing, pharmaceutical pills and cannabis and alcohol on a regular basis,
mm.
and started selling drugs to support my habit. And by the time I was 18, I had been arrested a number of times.
Wow.
I played football growing up, American football, and was captain of the varsity football team with my two best friends. And we all had interest to play college football. I got a DUI one night coming home from a party, and I was on a
Wow.
bunch of Xanax and liquor and cannabis, and I got to a freight train in the middle of the night, and I was delirious, and the train passing, made me even more tired. And thankfully, I put my car in park, but then I put my head back and I fell asleep. And I woke up to police knocking on the window.
Wow.
And I woke up, I roll down the window and I say to the officer, "Excuse me, officer, was I driving too slow?"
Oh,
And he
wow.
says, "Son, you've been parked here for an hour with your car running, the lights on. We got a call from the house right by, here by the train track." So I got arrested. I got a pretty bad DUI. That led to me being kicked off the football team.
Wow.
And at 17, 18 years old, that was my identity. That was my life. And so very quickly, I sabotaged everything that I took refuge in and that really had been my safety and my kind of ego existence at that time in my
Yeah.
life. And it just shattered. And underneath that, arrogant young man was a really tortured soul with a lot of emotional and psychological pain and insecurity and, sadness and really a broken heart from life and from family.
Mm,
And so that was really the beginning of my journey. Was I just spiraled downhill to this, depression and didn't want to be here anymore. And, 18 years old, you're that pressure is there and building of, what am I supposed to do with my life? How am I going to make a living? And so from 18, I just had these two questions in my face, which is how do I heal myself or find freedom from this suffering and this torture I'm experiencing every day? And what's the purpose of my life? What am I
hmm
doing here? And I had grown up around people who had made significant money and then ruined their quote unquote material success through dysfunctional behavior. So I knew that, money wasn't going to make you happy or be fulfilling and that wasn't success. So at a young age, I already knew that. But I didn't know what else to pursue because in our world, what else is a successful life?
Yeah.
And I had no role models or anything for that. So I just moved forward from 18, trying to figure out what am I doing on the planet and how do I break free of this suffering that I'm waking up every day tortured by.
Right.
And the short version is that led me to 5 different universities where I studied psychology, nutrition. I went to 2 schools for Chinese medicine, so science-based acupuncture and Chinese medicine, and then the older 5 element Taoist-based Chinese medicine.
Mm,
And I got into yoga, meditation, like all of us seekers. I read every book I could find. ranging from quantum physics to very woo-woo mystical, themes. And so just looking for the answers like we're all looking for so we can feel well, enjoy our lives, respect who we are, feel connected, feel like we understand what we're doing here. Um, and yeah, so that led me to all my work with other people.
Wow. Yeah, that's quite a journey, and I imagine a lot of listeners can relate to varying degrees. I mean, I think of my own partner. She, at 17, 18, alcohol abuse, got in some major trouble because of, her abuse, and now is like such a different person, and so it's really, it's such a common sort of theme to go through something like that. And like I said, of course, you have your own unique version of it, and everything. And like in her case, her family was really supportive, and there wasn't a lot of abuse at home, and just very, so it was almost like, well, hold on, you have no reason to be, behaving this way. And I think a lot of it goes much deeper than even what, certainly the circumstances of our childhood play a big part. And I'm of the belief that it even stretches beyond that. Like, where is the soul been in its journey previous to this, and how does that play in? And so yeah, I'm curious what your thoughts are on how, you know, childhood sort of, plays a role here, and how that relates to, self-worth, self-love, self-sabotage, all of those things.
Yeah, I mean, it all has obviously a major influence, and like you said, it can come from different sources. You can come from a dysfunctional, abusive family, which can set in motion these reactive patterns that we're trying to numb out, we're trying to
Hmm.
self-medicate, we're trying to remain disassociated because it's too painful to
Right.
be present and feel everything we're feeling. And then in a situation like you described for your partner, beyond just the family environment, there's so many influences socially. For example, just think about at school with your friends and trying to fit in, and how judgmental and mean or critical people can be, and
Yeah.
people can be very cliquey, and so even socially that can set in motion certain things. Or
Right.
you can come from a loving family of high achievers, right? So if you have parents who are high achievers or really functional, then sometimes you might feel like, am I ever good enough? Am I ever living up to the
Right.
standards of my really amazing, successful parents? So it doesn't
Right.
have to just come from
Right.
abuse. And then I also think, like you said, if you believe in past life, that we reincarnate, then as souls, we come here to learn specific lessons, which to me all center around learning about love,
Hmm.
unconditional love for ourselves and for others. Then someone like Brian Weiss, who I'm sure you're familiar with
Hmm.
his work,
Yeah.
would say that a soul comes into a family to teach all the family members about love
Mm.
as they're learning about love. So
Mm.
sometimes they play out certain patterns to teach the people around them, but also to kind of up level their own mastery in this lifetime as well.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's I definitely agree with that idea, and you see it a lot even with, families where it's like, where did this particular family member come from? It's like, they're so different, or the black sheep is oftentimes referred to, but even with myself, like how different in a lot of ways I turned out from my parents, and then of course there's those threads of similarity and connectivity, and so it's really a fascinating thing to think about how, this source, higher self, the universe, consciousness, whatever you want to call it, is organizing itself for optimal growth. It's kind of like the idea of like why genetic diversity on a physical level is important. It's not necessarily a good thing to, for family members to procreate, or someone who's related in some way, whereas if you can have someone from the other side of the world, two people coming together, that's really good to kind of to stimulate evolution and growth. So I think that sort of thing happens on a soul level too, quite often, where it's like this
Totally.
soul's thrown into the mix with those that they're really, going to stir up and are different from in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I know with in your book, as you mentioned, and, overcoming fear, insecurity, and depression is a big one for people. Everyone goes through it to some degree, um, and varying degrees and varying times in their life. And so, I'd love to just hear more about your book and sort of what you, yeah, what your thoughts are. Obviously, those who really want to go deep are going to go get the book. And I think even you offer the first several chapters here at the end. We're going to tell you guys how you can get access to that for free. But yeah, for those who aren't going to go get the book, obviously, I'd love to just explore why we have you on. Some of the high level thoughts and ideas that you share in the book.
Absolutely. Well, so all my work, obviously helping other people, came from my own suffering and healing. And so, just like I'm sure you and all your listeners, as seekers and people looking for truth and for healing and how to live an aware, mindful, healthy life, I was studying everything and trying to understand everything I could from science, so from biology and chemistry and genetics and epigenetics, all the way to reincarnation and, subtle energy and
Mm-hmm.
energy medicine, and, studied that full range from kind of science and logic all the way to metaphysical and, ethereal, less
Mm-hmm.
tangible.
Mm-hmm.
And what I eventually realized, that in my own healing and search for purpose and my spiritual journey, I was really just doing two things, which was really the same thing. And, after going to all these universities and studying with spiritual masters from all over the world and, spending years practicing meditation and yoga and Qigong,
Mm-hmm.
I realized that I was really just looking for love
Mm-hmm.
and learning how to love myself. So I
Right.
was looking for the love that I never got growing up, because my parents and my environment was struggling to love themselves
Yeah.
and could only love me to the degree that they did love themselves. And I was learning how to take care of myself, so take care of my heart, my body, my mind, my spirit, in all the ways I never learned as a child, because it's not something we come across really in school or a religious upbringing or in any way, because it's not valued enough in our society. And so I was just looking for love and learning how to love myself. And I could see from all my training in science and then all these other alternative perspectives, I could see how disease and depression grows inside of us from never learning how to love ourselves as children. So, in other words, repressing our emotions and our needs starting in childhood, because we never learn how to say, I feel this, I need this. And then to survive, because a lot of us are just trying to survive, typically, probably even just until today, even some of your listeners are probably still in survival mode,
Yeah.
which means we often reject and neglect our needs, our emotions, and our desires. And then also, if you think back, as kids, I never learned how to deal with the voice in my head, or my crazy thoughts, or my insecure thoughts, or my judgmental thoughts. And those two dynamics in particular, not learning how to take care of my heart and not learning how to take care of my mind, I realized were really at the root cause of most forms of disease and suffering, because those are also then the causes of what lead us into our unhealthy habits, right? If you don't know how to take care of your mind, you don't know how to take care of your emotions, you're more likely to choose to drink more, or do more drugs,
Yeah.
or spend time with people who are not healthy, or allow abuse, or go into a job or a situation that's not healthy for you, if you don't know how to value yourself mentally and emotionally. If you're plagued by self-doubt and fear and insecurity and a lack of self-worth, and you don't know how to get this stuff out, and then that leads to a bunch of bad lifestyle habits. So when I when could see so clearly how disease grows inside of us from not learning how to value ourselves, it was like everything just became so clear to me that we're really just learning how to love ourselves so that we could be healthy and happy and true to ourselves, and then offer the world healthy forms of love, right?
Yeah.
Because if our relationship to ourselves is toxic in any way, it comes out in our relationships to our partner, our
Yep.
family, our friends, our work. We have a toxic relationship to the things around us because of this inner toxicity.
Yeah.
And so everything for me really comes back to how to learn to value, love, care for, be kind to, be true to yourself in the present in every situation and relationship, which is very challenging, especially in our world today, which is so fast paced. And then, you feel like you have to go so fast and be so stressed to survive or to achieve anything. And then we've got things like social media that we're all hooked into, which in a lot of ways, it's almost like you have to, even for example, for your own business, even in trying to help people, you got to go online to try and reach and help more people. But then there's so much content online that's not healthy for us, or there's someone that'll have a million more followers than you or whatever. And so it
Yep.
triggers still those same themes. Are
Yep.
you loving to yourself? Are you believing you're not enough? Are you valuing the right things? Are you, and is
Yep.
that a healthy relationship to yourself, or is it toxic?
Right.
And so to me, everything comes back to this theme.
Yeah. Yeah. I fully agree with that. I always say we have wildly differing paths as humans, oftentimes, but some of the common threads, the number one thing I think we're all here to learn is self-love, because without that as the foundation, everything is built on the sand, so to speak, without a firm foundation of self-love. And it is really challenging with social media and all these things bombarding you, to kind of like, okay, like this, and I always say, one of the tools that I always share with people is like, instead of looking at something that shows up on your feed, for example, that you admire or wish you had, or could be used as a weapon against yourself, in insecurity, and sort of self-deprecation, or I'm not that, or I'm not good enough, I could never, whatever those stories may be. I always say the the way that I like to look at it and recommend looking at it is, you know, this thing, this that I admire or would like to have more of in my life, could not appear in my life. That which is like unto itself is drawn, right? You're going to attract what you are in some way, shape, or form. And so when you take that perspective and say, oh, okay, this thing is appearing on my feed, this person, this whatever, that I wish I had more of whatever they represent to me, not as a tool to try and diminish myself in comparison, but actually I'm attracting this out of the infinite things that are vying for my precious attention and energy. This is a thing that is front and center in front of me because it's such a close vibrational match to where I'm at, that I'm calling it in, if you will. So I think that's a really powerful distinction that I found, that is, it takes it from a leading you down the path of maybe a disempowering story to something that is very empowering.
I think that's so beautiful, really. And as I'm sure you've talked about on the show a lot, everything comes back to our perspective.
Yep.
And then the thoughts that we think and eventually choose to think, right, about anything either unlocks our healthiest expression genetically, spiritually, or unlocks our most dysfunctional and toxic,
Hmm.
expression.
Yeah.
And so I think that's beautiful.
Yeah. And one other thing that you'd mentioned is, of course, it's children. I had someone on the show recently who was talking about like the number one sin is when the parent tells the child, you know, don't cry, whatever, like that's like where all issues stem from when you're the parent, and often, and of course, not really realizing the damage that it does, but you're teaching children at this young, impressionable age that it's not safe to feel your emotions. And
Yep.
so that becomes the beginning of stuffing it down, and which then leads to, you know, emotions which are meant to, we watch a baby who can't understand, don't cry. What are they, or a toddler, one, two, I guess by two, they start kind of understanding, but it's like they're just 1 minute they're happy, the next minute the emotions are pouring through them where they're screaming and crying, and then whoop, like a drop of a hat, they've switched gears again, and they're it's like emotion, energy, and motion is no problem for them. And so, but then we're taught and programmed, stuff it down, hold it back, and the next thing you know, it is turned into, you know stagnant water, right? What happens in a stagnant pool? It starts festering with, all kinds of stuff. And that's exactly what I believe happens to us, and where disease comes from, ultimately the root of it, etc.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think that's a great place to actually go if we really want to go to the root cause of our suffering, is that dynamic that you were describing when we're children is really the beginning of all of our problems. But in particular, it's the beginning of us feeling unworthy.
Yeah.
Because if you don't feel worthy of your feelings,
Yep.
you don't feel worthy of having needs, you don't feel worthy of having dreams or goals. And so a lot of us subconsciously feel guilty for existing, like we don't even have a right to be here.
Yep.
And then on top of that is, I feel guilty for having feelings. I feel shame for having feelings. Like somehow there's something wrong with me in the beginning from having these feelings and needs and dreams or this imagination. And that sets in motion all of our dysfunction as we move forward. And so in the present, that's why learning to give ourselves permission and say, my feelings matter, my needs matter, my dreams, my purpose, my imagination matters, is really the secret to healing, because nobody's going to come along and be able to do that for us and say, Brandon, your feelings matter, you have to value them. But then in any situation, you're the one who has to actually do that with me, with your partner, with your friends, but it all comes down to being self-aware enough to understand, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I need, this is what I want, this is what's healthy for me, and then give voice to it and act on it starting now, every day, in every situation, because that's what we were never encouraged to do when we were little, and we never learned how to do. And it's not because our parents are bad people, although some of us had evil, maybe really unconscious evil parents, but even the best of parents don't really know this stuff. And it's not something that's passed down from generation to generation. So I like to say, it has to stop with us. At what point does that pattern of self-harm and self-destruction that's passed down from generation to generation, where does it end?
Yeah.
And so each of us has to come to that point ourselves where we say it ends with us. And that's kind of, we're really healing our bloodline by doing that, and thus healing, humanity. And the other part of this conversation that's so important, especially now, and there's more and more information and more research coming out, is that I also, my view is that our relationship to ourselves not only determines our relationship to other people, but to the planet, right? Yeah. So, if we don't take care of ourselves, then you're going to cut down those trees and not really care, and not realize that those trees are your lungs. Yeah. And if you cut down those trees, there's no oxygen. Or, you'll drive down the road and you'll throw out your plastic bottle out the window because you don't realize that earth is your drinking water, that's your food, that's your children's food and drinking water, or you'll throw your cigarette on the ground. It's like, who's going to pick that up?
Yeah.
It all comes back to this relationship to ourselves and how much responsibility and accountability we're taking for our thoughts, for our feelings, for what we say, how we say it, and is it coming from love? Is it coming from kindness?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I'm curious what your thoughts are on, someone, like my father, for example, who his father was very, you know, abusive to him, when he was very young, and he was never told he was loved by his parents. He's really learned how to love, I think, with his own family. My mother, very loving, and so, but what's interesting for him in recent times, some of this stuff has come back up. He's 75 years old, and all of a sudden it's like there's this resurgence of unworthiness and depression, and I know it all stems back to you know childhood, and of course he's very religious too, so it kind of ties in, I think, you know God, daddy in the sky wants to hurt you, just like, you know, if you get it wrong, you get hurt. Right? You're going to get tortured. So I think there's some of this, and it's really, he's always been so kind of easygoing, and he went through a bout of depression kind of when he first became a Christian, when I was like probably 11, 12 years old. And now all these years later, here it is rearing its head again. And it's one of the things that's frustrating is you can say anything you want to someone about your worthiness and this, look at the loving family you have around you and all the, your kids and grandkids and all the good that's come from you, right? In a sense.
mm,
And yet it's like sort of the subconscious thing that people can understand it at a conscious level, and maybe even, say, okay, yeah, I can see that. I agree with that. Yet this subconscious, using him as an example, programming is like, it's like you can't hardly touch it or get to it. And so I'm curious if you have any thoughts about how to really dig in there and break through this, unworthiness and self-doubt and lack of self-love that I know. So he's like so many others that are carrying this from those formative years.
so, like we were talking about before, when we're children, we, a lot of us develop this feeling of not feeling worthy of love or not feeling worthy of happiness because subconsciously we feel like, is there something wrong with us? Because if our parents aren't able to love us fully or in a healthy way, we interpret that as, oh, is there something wrong with us? We're not getting what we need,
Yep.
or am I not doing something right? And when we're little, mom and dad actually play God,
Yeah.
right? They actually create life. So they symbolize God.
Yeah.
And then, as adults, a lot of adults feel like I was abandoned by God, or I've done so much wrong that maybe God doesn't love me anymore.
Yeah.
But it goes back to these deeper subconscious, energies and dynamics that are set in motion when we are children, because we never learn how to relate to ourselves as though we have value.
Right.
So as a grown man, like you were talking about your father, part of the healing is the conscious understanding of this, that I grew up feeling unworthy because my parents didn't love themselves and they couldn't love me in a healthy way. So it never had anything to do with me in the first place. Right. And that's one of the things I like to help people understand, because one of the biggest themes we grapple with in learning how to take really good care of ourselves and love ourselves is, how much of this is too selfish, right? Is self-love selfish, right?
Right.
And so I like to demystify the concept of selfishness, because a mother and a father, those archetypes, the healthy archetype of an unconditionally loving mother or father is kind of like a symbol of selflessness, right?
Right.
But if you really dissect it, when I'm teaching, I always ask people, I want you to think back to your mother and your father and the time you were conceived.
Yeah.
And then I want to ask you, why do you think they had you?
Mm.
So I like to let people let this sit for a second, even for the listeners. Why did your parents have you? And when you really dissect it, it's not, the minority of people say, oh, my parents were conscious, loving, awake people that wanted to create an expression of their love that made
Right.
the world a better place because they knew they were bringing in an enlightened
Right.
soul that was going to improve things. Most people, at least half, it was an accident, right? It was unplanned. And it was coming from just wanting to have pleasure, just wanting to connect, wanting to feel loved, wanted to feel affection, wanting to feel important. For some people, they thought that that's the purpose of their life, to be a mother, to be a father. For some people, they thought, I don't know what else to do with my life, or everybody else is doing it. I thought that's just what you do. Or some people subconsciously thought, I need someone to take care of me in my old age, or
Right.
my first child needs a friend. There's all these reasons. But when you ask them, then I ask people, okay, so here are all the reasons why two people do something to bring a life into the world. And then I ask them, well, is that selfish or is it selfless? And eventually everybody gets to the fact that conceiving life is selfish. And the reason I bring this up is that, one, it was never about you in the first place, ever. None of this was ever about us. Yeah. It was our parents' unconscious, selfish drives and nature's, instinctual unconscious drive. And it had nothing to do with us as an individual and our, lack of worth or our, intrinsic value. It had absolutely nothing to do with us. And so then I like to help people look at nature. And when you look at nature, I always go back to an apple tree. And if you think about an apple tree as a example of nature, nature is designed to be selfish in a healthy way so that it can become strong and healthy and of benefit to the environment around it, right? An apple tree, right, selfishly takes what it needs from the ground. It selfishly takes what it needs from the atmosphere. It selfishly takes all the light it needs so that it can grow into the strongest, healthiest version of itself. And then what happens as it grows into this version? Well, it provides apples and sustenance and food for other people, right? It provides oxygen and clean air for people. It provides shade. It provides firewood, right? So through selfishly taking really good care of itself, it becomes of benefit for generations, right?
Yeah.
For all kinds of life forms. And I think that's just what we never learned. So as a grown man, at our age and in our 70s, I think it's really important to understand these dynamics. Then step 2 is I need to understand, how would I relate to myself if I was worthy and I valued myself 100%? How would I relate to myself today? Yeah. So I like to help people understand those habits, how you relate to yourself as though you valued yourself 100% today. And I have found that if you work on practicing these habits, it does 2 things. It prevents additional suffering in the future, and it heals past pain. It washes out and it heals past pain. So I like to help, like I said, I would help someone like your dad understand exactly how to do this. And then, as you know, there are dozens of practices that can help us clean out our subconscious, right? So, you can start journaling. You can go and get some acupuncture. As we talked about, things like yoga, qigong are great. Sweating is great. Kinesiology is great. Energy healing is great. To me, there's no just meditation. It's, to me, doing anything and everything you can to feel better, to have a deeper sense of peace and, feeling of wholeness and self-worth. So it's good to just try all these things, because if you valued yourself 100%, you would want to take care of yourself in all these ways that you never learned how.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I know there's no silver bullet necessarily, right? It's like, and sometimes the best, the best thing that we can experience to heal ourselves is time, right? It's just like, time sort of changes everything to some degree. And so,
Brandon, the other thought that comes to mind that I wanted to share with you, which I think for some of your listeners who are at a certain level really appreciate this, is that when it comes to our beliefs about God or a higher power and the kind of convoluted relationship we can have to a religious upbringing or to our ideas of God, one of the things, and this is a kind of a controversial viewpoint, but I find it's kind of one of the final frontiers of really healing and experiencing liberation on a grounded and regular basis, is that eventually, in my experience, we get to this point where we realize, I know you feel this way, we're not separate from the universe and we're not separate from God, right? So if you're still living in a way where you feel unworthy of God's love or abandoned by God, what I hear you saying is that you still just feel unworthy of your own love and that you feel abandoned by yourself. And it's really powerful when we get to the place where we actually can acknowledge, I am God in human form. I am universal intelligence in human form, and I'm not that more than you. We're all that. We're all the same of that. And the power in acknowledging that and affirming that is not about coming from a place of ego, but it's about taking 100% responsibility for your healing, your freedom, and your self-worth. Because if you keep saying God is outside of you, then you are still allowing something for you to blame, right? You can still blame God for you not being worthy or you not being healed or you not being happy. But as soon as you acknowledge, I am an expression of God. I am God in human form, just like everybody else and everything else.
God-godding. We are God-godding, as I like to say.
Right, exactly. And when you say that, you then have access to everything you need to have access to heal, because you're basically taking 100% responsibility and not putting anything outside of you. And so then you come from a mindset and a view and a thinking where it's coming from, I am one with the universe, I am God in human form. That means the aspect of my psyche that once believed it was unworthy of God's love or it was abandoned by God is really just an aspect of my psyche that has been misperceiving reality. And I need to love and value and take care of this part of my thinking and then value myself 100% and treat myself, like I was saying before, as though I'm 100% worthy and valuable now. And so at some point, I'd love to talk about the habits that a human, in my mind, would practice on a daily and weekly basis if they valued themselves 100%, if they felt worthy 100%. And if you do these things, that's how you heal the feelings of inadequacy, the feelings of insecurity, and then all the damage that we've done to ourselves since childhood. The acts of self-love from the inside out are how you actually do the inner laundry, how you wash the pain out from the inside out, is through the expression of self-love on a daily basis.
Yeah, totally well said. And I couldn't agree more. It's like, I think so much suffering comes from this separation between us and source, God, higher self, consciousness, the universe, whatever you want to call it. It's like, you are it. And it is you. And don't get a big head, because it is all. And you are one with the all and a part of the all and a fractal of that, of the higher, let's say, more expanded version of ourself, our higher self. Or you think of God as the collective of all consciousness at some level. And it's this sort of divine dichotomy, like you and I are separate. That's true. You and I are one. That's true. It's a relative truth based on the vantage point from which we are speaking. Right? Like, I am this autonomous entity, going by the name Brandon Beecham, and you're Blake Bauer, 2 BBs. And my initials are BBB, so I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to figure out how to be in life, but you too, apparently. But I digress. What I was going to say is yes, I'm this human entity from one perspective, but hold on. I have organs that work together and have their own collective consciousness and cells and, within me. And it's the same thing with us. We're fractals, and it's like it's like a sliding scale of vision. Oh, I can see through the lens of this avatar. I can see through the lens of a cell. I can see through the lens of a planet. I can see through the lens of a planetary consciousness, of, on and on, physical and beyond the physical. And so it's just different vantage points for God to know herself. And so that I fully agree. And it's like, I can take someone like my father, since we've been using him as an example. It's like, there's this God is out there separate that needs to be pleased, or else, and there is no out there. And I think that separation is the root of, so much pain and suffering and detachment.
It's disempowering. It's just so disempowering.
Totally disempowering. And it leads to, a thing that I think cripples a lot of people, which, is fears and uncertainty and doubt and feeling small and cut off. And so I'd love to hear sort of the tips to overcoming suffering that you referenced, as well as, for those who are crippled by fear, because fear is something else. Once it cripples you, it's like, it's kind of hard to, I think of the example that comes to mind when I think of fear is like, I see some of these rock climbing videos. There's some pretty incredible ones. I'm forgetting the name of them off the top of my head. This guy who scaled.
Is that Free Solo?
Yeah. And then there's another one, the Alpinist, which someone told me is even crazier. And these guys, and I'm like, what would be so challenging for me is, when I get up there, that's when the fear's kicking in so much, which causes me to lose control of motor functions more. I'm weak. I'm nauseous. It's like when you need your faculties the most, fear can sort of take your feet out from under you. And so, yeah, I'd just love to hear you speak about breaking through fears and uncertainty, and then kind of some of the tips you referenced.
Well, it's beautiful because they're two sides of the same coin. So it'll be a perfect way of bringing this all together. But so if you personally think about this, and then for the listeners, if you think about right now where in your life fear is holding you back, you'll typically see that in some relationship or some situation, fear is stopping you from expressing something that you're feeling, or fear is stopping you from taking action in a direction you feel called to go, from following your heart, something stopping you, or fear is stopping you from actually taking time and space for your self-care, right? So fear typically stops us from doing one of those three things: expressing ourselves, taking action in alignment with what we feel or feel called to do. And then 3, fear is stopping us from taking time and space for self-care or whatever it is that we need to be alone. And when you break it down, what you'll see is that you'll realize that you have this belief that if you're 100% true to yourself, if you express yourself, if you follow your heart, if you take time for yourself and take good self-care, you have this belief that something's going to go wrong, or everything's going to go to shit, or everything's going to fall apart, or you'll be punished, right? And that's typically the belief that's stopping you, that's underneath the fear. I have this belief that everything's going to go to shit, it's not going to work out, something's going to end badly if I'm 100% true to myself, if I do what I'm wanting to do, what the fear's stopping me from doing, or if I take time and space for myself or asking for that, which the fear is stopping me from doing. And so what you're basically saying is, I don't trust life. I don't trust God. I don't trust the universe. And as a carry-on from what we were talking about previously, when I hear you say, I don't trust life, I don't trust universe, I don't trust God, what I really hear you saying is that you don't trust yourself, because you're just projecting in your head your relationship to yourself and to life out onto the world. So when someone says, I don't trust life, I don't trust the universe, I don't trust God, I'm stopping myself because of fear, what you're really doing is you're stopping yourself because you don't trust yourself. And then the next question is, well, why don't you trust yourself? And the answer becomes really clear. If you think about how you've treated yourself, right, for the past 2, 3, 4, 5 decades, and I ask you, have you been your own best friend? Have you talked nicely to yourself? Have you really been there for yourself? Or have you judged yourself, criticized yourself, rejected yourself, abandoned yourself, shut yourself up, treated yourself horribly, put yourself down? most people start to see, oh, I've treated myself pretty badly over the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years. I've been betraying myself for most of my life. And so let's say, Brandon, I was your brother, and if I've been betraying you for most of our lives, would you trust me? No. So if you think, if you've been betraying and hurting yourself for most of your life, of course you don't trust yourself. So that's why most people get so crippled by fear, is because they don't trust themselves and they're so afraid of more pain. So they keep hurting themselves so that nobody else hurts them. But it never works, right? So they don't get, they end up just we keep continually having our heart broken by life and by ourselves when we let fear stop us because of this self-doubt that we're plagued by. Thankfully, the solution is really simple and clear and comes back to those habits or those tips that we were talking about. And so if you want to start to trust yourself again, right, you got to start to be honest and true to yourself in the present moment, starting now, every day in every situation, okay? And so this is where I start to outline exactly how to love yourself, because a lot of people will say, oh, you have to be true to yourself, or you have to love yourself, or you should love yourself. But the multi-trillion-dollar industry question is, how do I actually do that, right?
Yeah.
And so just, we can go into whatever you want to go into, but the 5 keys I like to highlight for people are, 1, we have to express ourselves honestly and kindly in every situation, even when we're scared. So that's number 1. Number 2 is we have to act in alignment with what we feel and need, even when we're scared. That's number 2. Number 3 is we got to take time and space on a daily and weekly basis for ourselves for self-care, whatever medicine we need. So it could be meditation, it could be a bath, it could be doing nothing. It could be reading a book. It could be listening to a podcast. It could be writing or painting. Whatever is the medicine you need. We all need time and space to just feel out instinctually and intuitively what it is that we need, and have space to naturally gravitate towards it, not be so, scheduled or regimented. And then the 4th one is taking care of our mind, right? Because most of us don't take care of our mind on a daily basis through meditation and through learning about this superpower I like to talk about that we have, which is that we all have the capacity to choose our thoughts. Most people don't realize that they can choose their thoughts, and they feel like the victim of the voice in their head. And but we all can actually say, I want to think this, and work on thinking it, and think about things in a way that leads us towards what we want instead of sabotages everything. And then the last tip is valuing our time and our energy, right? Because like Brandon, you and I, like a bomb could drop in an hour, and this is it. This is our life. And if we didn't really want to be here, and this is how we spent the last hour of our life, that would be pretty tragic, And so I find that a lot of us are so used to doing things we don't want to be doing and being with people that we don't want to be with, which is from our conditioning, that we don't value our time and energy enough. And then not knowing how to value our time and energy leads to having no boundaries. So we spend time with people who are toxic or not healthy for us, and we give it too much energy instead of every day being mindful that this is all I got, and I got to make the most of it. So I'm going to spend it on people and things and interests and self-care, things that really matter to me, instead of just wasting our days. And so those 5 keys, which are these habits that we need to work on every day, are typically we stop ourselves from doing it from the fear and the self-doubt that we were talking about. But the irony is that the only way to heal the fear, that paralyzing fear, is to work on doing these 5 things, even when you're shaking, anxious, and sweating. And over time, these acts of self-love, like Pac-Man, literally eat and dissolve the fear. Our true self, our true essence, when we're expressing it, like our conversation right now, is the truth, which you could say is light, and pure love from the core of our being, right? The core of our soul, our essence, expressing from the core out through our physical body into the world. And when you are expressing that light, your essence, your true self, through your thoughts, through your words, through your actions, that light and that love, which is our essence, heals the pain and the fear inside of us from the inside out. That is the logic of the dynamic of how love and truth actually heals us from the inside out, is through that expression. And so the only way to overcome the fear and self-doubt is to stop betraying yourself, do these 5 things every day, and trust that it will dissolve the fear over time.
Yeah. Love that. Love that perspective. Love those tips. And yeah, just amazing. Amazing. Well, as we sort of wind down here, this has been really, really powerful shares, Blake. I would like to shift gears a little bit. And as the listeners know, I love hearing stories of synchronicity or serendipity or a positive paranormal story. And curious if you have a fun, inspiring story up your sleeve for us.
Well, I've got a couple that come to mind. I mean, the first one, as you mentioned in the beginning, was how we came to know each other. I was at your house for a party and a book launch a couple years ago. And then now fast forward a few years later, my publicist says, I booked you on this podcast. And I looked you up and I said, oh, I know that guy. And, here we are, which is beautiful and fun.
Absolutely.
One of the most powerful ones I could share with you is, it's beautiful. It's not so light, but I'm going to share it anyways. So I lost my brother to a heroin overdose in 2013. And
wow.
At that time, my aunt had been seeing a psychic, a medium, who she felt was really gifted. And I really trust my aunt. She's very switched on and, an amazing woman. So the day I booked this appointment, it was like a Saturday morning to go and see this psychic. It was within a couple weeks of my brother passing. It was a Saturday morning around 8 or 9 o'clock, and I was rushing. Well, I was, going kind of running a little bit late to go see her. And I was stopping to get my coffee in the morning, and it was raining, and I was in Chicago. And I get out of the car, and I'm in the back of the parking lot in Starbucks. And I start going through the parking lot, and it's drizzling, and there's this puddle. And in this puddle is all these pennies, 12, maybe 20 pennies in the water. And I thought to myself, just fleeting thought, that's odd. Who would throw all those pennies in the puddle? So I go inside, I get my coffee, I come back out, let's say 3 or 4 minutes later, and I hadn't thought about the pennies again, but I take the same pathway that I took to get to the, through the cars back to my car, and I look in the puddle, and all the pennies are gone. So I thought to myself, that's so weird they were there, and then it's so weird who took all those pennies within the 3 or 4 minutes. So I walk in to go see this psychic or medium. I've never met her before. She knows nothing about me. I walk in the door, she reaches her hand in her pocket, and she hands me a penny, and she goes, I don't know why I'm supposed to give this to you, but your brother told me I'm supposed to.
Whoa.
And my heart just dropped. And
what?
That was one of two. It was really the only meaningful thing that happened with her, with our entire interaction, but it was so powerful.
Yeah.
To feel his connection in that way.
Wow.
So
that's a really cool one. I like that a lot. What comes to mind for me is my sister has, when I was a toddler, she's 3.5 years older than me. She was trying to teach me the word penny. And, we're in the car or something, backseat, and she's like, penny, penny, like saying it over and over. Well, in that moment, I determined that it wasn't the little object in her hand. She was Penny. So for years, first formative years, I called my sister Penny, and she's like, no, this is the Penny. And I just kept calling her Penny. My mom was like, thought it was super cute and hoped it would stick. It didn't stick, but for a year or two or something, that's what I called my sister. So
oh, that's beautiful.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, that is beautiful. So cute.
Yeah. It's such an interesting thing to think about too, like all the threads of connectivity of, even your brother's ability to perceive this conversation at that time, and and how it would lead to a story of, oh, that reminds me, this is about your brother. That reminds me of my sister, and on and on.
Well,
But
to tie everything up, my brother was so switched on and so aware, but he never learned how to love himself. He never learned the practicality to say my life matters, my time, my existence matters, my feelings, my needs, they matter. And so, the earth was too hard for him. And I know that I'm sure you have a lot of listeners. I'm sure you've been through it. I've been through those phases in my life. And so, that's why this learning how to relate to ourselves in a way that says I matter, and my feelings matter, and my needs matter, my time here matters, even if it doesn't matter to anybody else, is the key. Because, sometimes we don't have someone to lean on. And so we need to be our own best friend. And so for me, it's been just so critical so I could have that strength to hold that container of unconditional love for myself and then invite other people into it. But if I didn't have that, I wouldn't be here like him. Yeah. So I wish that for your listeners is that, you find the time and the love for yourself to really understand this. Yeah. Yeah, please make the time. Make the time. And there is a path out. I mean, I'm sure, for yourself, like there is a path out of that deepest form of suffering. And there are good people here like Brandon, like myself, and like, our networks. And there are good people here that want to see you do well and be well and be seen and heard and appreciated, even if we didn't get it growing up or we're not getting it right now.
Yep. And it's like you are your own soulmate.
Totally.
You are the one you've been waiting for
100%.
To save yourself.
Totally.
And, I like to say, no, there has never been a soul in all of eternity more worthy than you are.
100%.
You are as worthy as any other soul ever has been, could be, or will be. And the sooner you can realize the absolute profound truth of that statement, the quicker you can get on with, being all the things that you've always wanted for yourself. You can be that for yourself. And from there, it's a whole new world that will open up for you.
I love that.
And you deserve it.
I love that. And I like tying in all our themes, the question that, if you're a Christian or Catholic, you ask the question, what would Jesus do? And that's like a guiding light for people.
Yep.
I like to ask people, if you valued yourself 100% today in this situation, what would you do?
Yeah.
And now do that.
Yep. So exactly. That's a great way to start. Like, just like, okay, I'm going to do it just from a logical standpoint. What's the most loving thing that I could do in this moment? If I had the most value, maybe I'm not feeling that, but let's play pretend, because I think that's going to lead me somewhere good. And that's a great place to sort of start.
Beautiful.
Well, this has been a beautiful conversation, my friend. And I know the listeners have appreciated it too. And what is the best way for people to connect with you, follow your work, etc.?
I'm on, social media. So Instagram, it's Blake D. Bauer, Bauer. My website is unconditional-selflove.com. And then my book is You Were Not Born to Suffer.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I do have one final question for you, Blake. And I will throw out with your book on their site. You said on your site they can get the first few chapters, free. If I recall you saying at the beginning.
Yeah, there's the first 65 pages for free on my website if you go there.
Great. So one final question for you, and it's my cliche closer. And it is this: in 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to Blake Bauer?
My feeling is that we come here to learn about love, and we come here to enjoy being alive and to have some fun.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you, my friend. I couldn't agree with all of your thoughts more. They're super profound and empowering. Thank you for doing what you do. And all of you out there for tuning your beautiful brainwaves into another episode. Until next time, journey well. Also, before we sign off, I wanted to remind you to download the Golden Key audio or ebook as my free gift to you at goldenkey.gift using the Golden Key code POSITIVEHEAD. And please, if you enjoy my gift, leave a positive review on Amazon so others can find the book and unlock their lives with the help of the Golden Key as well.